Which bender are you? Perhaps your versatility resembles waterbender qualities, or your stability in precarious situations parallels with that of earthbenders. Maybe you're as aggressive as firebenders, or your airbender-like tranquility is unmatched to those around you. The bending arts that I'm referencing are from the animated series Avatar: The Last Airbender and its sequel, The Legend of Korra. Now, you're probably wondering, Tenzin, aren't you a little too old to be watching cartoons? Well, these two shows aren't your average cartoons. Among the many heavy topics covered in them, one resonated with me very much, and that is the Tibetan people and culture. Names such as Tenzin, Bima, and Yongjin are akin to those of my friends and family members, and before the genocide on the show, air nomads raised airbending kids to be well-trained monks, similar to the experiences of some Tibetan children. The associations that I've been able to make with these shows have emphasized that I am an earthbender, but before all else, I am a Tibetan. I am the granddaughter of a Tibetan metalsmith, I am the niece of a Tibetan nun, and I am the daughter of Tibetan immigrants. But I wasn't always as open about my cultural identity as I am today, because of the lack of Tibetan representation in the media and thus having no one to look up to. This invalidated my identity because I felt as though if my culture wasn't being represented, then it wasn't worth being proud of. This mindset stuck with me for a majority of my childhood years. Let me ask you this. Above me is a map of Asia. Can you locate where Tibet is? If so, can you mentally draw out the country on this map? If you were unsuccessful in either of these things, you're not alone. Tibet is situated in between two of the world's most populous countries, China and India. The country's rivers provide water to 1.35 billion people, and if it were a sovereign nation, it would be the world's 10th largest. But why were you unable to identify the country on this map? The lack of knowledge about Tibet is why the shows Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra resonate with me so much. The fantastical yet realistic storylines integrate the Tibetan cause and entertainment, two fields that seldom coexist. For example, the main characters in both shows, Aang and Korra, are reincarnations of previous avatars, just like the Dalai Lamas are reincarnations of their previous lives. Characters in the shows then appoint this precocious figure by following the same technique that Tibetan monks use to find the next Dalai Lama, the highest figure among Tibetans. Just like the appointment of the next Dalai Lama, avatars must correctly identify relics that belong to their previous lives. After doing so, both the Dalai Lamas and avatars undergo intensive training to be the person they're destined to become. The sacred belief and act provide Tibetans like me with a sense of hope, that the reincarnation cycle of Tibetan Buddhism's highest figure will continue amid the cultural genocide happening in Tibet. Some parallels aren't as subtle, however. The entirety of the first series involved a rather insatiable monarchy that seized power through its economic, technological, and military advancements. The show featured a fictional event known as the 100-Year War that ripped many citizens from their homes. This sparked a massive refugee wave to Ba Sing Se. I couldn't help but draw similarities between this and the aftermath of the 1959 Tibetan Uprising. As Tibetans acted in repudiation of China's oppressive regime on March 10, 1959, they were met with large-scale violence. As a result, the Dalai Lama and 100,000 other Tibetans, including my dad and his family, fled Tibet by foot. Their almost 2-week-long trek across the Himalayas and other harsh conditions led to seeking asylum in India, where my dad lived until he came to America through the Tibetan Immigration Act of 1990. And although my dad has lived peacefully in the States for decades now, Indigenous Tibetans must live in an environment that Freedom House reports as the least free country in the world, alongside Syria. Although watching the genocide of air nomads and colonization of different towns and villages on the shows were disturbing, I also felt strangely validated. It's like that moment you all feel when you see someone like you on the big screen. Emboldened. At that moment, I realized the importance of representation. While the creators of the shows have drawn criticism, I try to look past it at first. You see, the thing about being part of a community that's barely portrayed in the media is that you'll take any ounce of representation that you can get, which is both a gift and a curse. A curse because diverse stories are often overlooked for the whitewashed version. A couple of years ago, UCLA's Hollywood Diversity Report cited that in 2017, the US population was approximately 60% white and 40% minority. Emphasis on approximately because not everyone fills out the census, so the non-white community is projected to be even larger. Despite this reality, the same source states that a mere 19.8% of all Hollywood film leads are from the minority community, which makes up nearly half of the US population. I'll give you a clear example of this. This is a poster of a live-action remake for The Last Airbender. Do you see the problem? It's not just the characters' outward appearances that are lost to Eurocentrism, which is a worldview that's centered on Western civilization. It's their stories as well. Aang was heavily influenced by gurus and monks, terms that are exclusive to those who practice Buddhism, Hinduism, and other select religions. Sokka always wore face paint before fighting in wars, an act associated with many indigenous cultures. The bending styles featured on the shows are based on the martial arts, which are of East Asian origin. The colonization of Asian indigenous cultures by Eurocentric Hollywood standards takes a toll on communities of color. Kids are often told that they can be and do anything they want, but if they can't find anyone to look up to, it becomes harder to believe. This type of feeling grows with them throughout the years. So this live-action remake is not only white people profiting off of an industry that epitomizes Eurocentrism, it also erases people of color from their own narrative. Don't get me wrong, I found the Avatar universe to be deeply meaningful and entertaining, but it was also problematic. Firstly, it was a melting pot for various Asian and indigenous cultures to the point where they were only being used for aesthetics. Secondly, the creators never directly stated their sources of inspiration, which discredited the unique backgrounds that laid the foundation for the characters and plots that we all know and love. But it also made me wonder why this cartoon that was written by white men was the first time my Tibetan background was being represented in the media. I understand the creator's vantage point. They wanted to entertain. They wanted to tell a story. But this was not a white man's story to tell. While the misrepresentation behind and in front of the cameras can be discouraging, it's made me realize the importance of storytelling. The traditions of storytelling differ across all cultures, but it's all rooted in unity. It unifies the past with the present so that kids are cognizant of their ancestral lineage. It also unifies the present with the future so the sense of togetherness ripples for generations. Storytelling is not only an art, but a power that can educate and inspire. During the onset of the pandemic, when all our lives were put on hold, I partnered with the Tibetan Youth Council to leverage the power of storytelling. The TYC was created in 2017 by one of my peers and has since advocated for human rights in Tibet and preserved Tibetan culture in America. We've initiated many projects, but the storytelling project has been the most sentimental to me because it was my first time spearheading a project with the organization. I've always loved writing, but never took it upon myself to explore my creative side. However, after watching Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, I had an agency to preserve the authenticity of the Tibetan narrative. The TYC was collectively inspired by our own difficulties as children in understanding what it means to be Tibetans in America, kids of immigrants and descendants of a foreign yet familiar place. With no previous experience up our sleeves, we worked on this project for months and delivered it to the kids at our community center. Here are some snippets from the book. It features characters such as Dundu and Dawa, and it features activities such as making bangdans, a colorful Tibetan apron-like garment, and pecha, Tibetan butter tea. But within these minor details lies a more concrete storyline we wanted to convey. Stories of our parents and grandparents. The start of the book takes place in Tibet. The idyllic, peaceful setting is home to many villagers, some of them being siblings Dundu, Dashit, Hidding, and their parents. After some time, the parents fall ill and ultimately pass away, leaving the three children as orphans. One day, troops raid their village. However, the siblings are able to escape and walk for hundreds of miles until they spot a group of villagers just like them, who they flee Tibet with. After starting lives in Nepal, Dundu and her son Dawa must leave their family behind as a result of the Tibetan Immigration Act of 1990. As a mother-son duo live in America with the help of their sponsor, we see hard work and determination manifest in their daily activities. Once Dawa is old enough, he's able to bring most of his family's members to the States. The story ends with the family finding a community center that hosted Tibetans just like them. The Tibetan Youth Council hosted a workshop with kids where we read the story together and talked about the importance of sharing your background, embracing your roots, and representation in the media. Although I resonated with the air nomads in Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, this book filled the void that I had experienced when watching the shows. Unlike the Avatar universe that was created by white men who made no such affiliations with the storylines and characters on the shows, and who blended various cultures for profit, this book inextricably linked the diasporic, immigrant, and family experiences with Tibetans themselves. When reading this book, Tibetan kids shared a mutual experience with Dundu and Dawa, but also with the creators of the book themselves. This harbors a sense of inclusion and representation because it sends a message to kids that our heritage is worth discussing. And although we as a society often value entertainment over education, it's important to be mindful of who and what the media we consume represents. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that our cultural media is tainted, with profits and aesthetics being valued over authenticity. But the story doesn't just have to end there. If you feel like you're being misrepresented in the media, capitalize on that and weave your own narrative. initiate a local community project, launch a social media campaign, give a talk at your high school. Watching both the shows and movie from the Avatar universe, I felt that my culture and people were being stolen from me, but I reclaimed this narrative through a children's book that was created by the Tibetan youth for the Tibetan youth. Although the TYC didn't have the budget to make TV shows or movies, we worked with what we did have. We had ideas, we had stories, we had experiences. And if you yourself are indifferent about such an issue, then do it